Hi, everyone. Welcome to the art lecture series. I'm Shah Osha. Today we have a really exciting and special guest, our own Dr. Gilda Sheppard. And I've got a couple of things to announce in terms of the final lecture for this quarter, which will be week 8. We've got Simone Nicolas Savannah, who's the author of Uses of My Body. So join us in 2 weeks for that. And I have, I put the link to our website, the blog that announces our lectures, and also has the archive of previous talks, and it's years of talks that you can access and listen to. And that's also on the blog. So I put that in the chat. We have with us Eric Steinhoff with his lecture series of Reimagining Community Safety, working with us today to bring Gilda here. And we have Jordan Silvera from Foundational Studio Projects, who will be introducing Gilda. So we have a few of us up here today. And I am going to remind everyone that after about an hour's worth of talk, we'll have an opportunity to interact with Gilda, and we encourage your interaction. None of us like to be up alone on this Zoom neverland. And one of the nice ways to reach out and to interact is to raise your hand and actually ask your question. But the other way to do it would to write it into the Q&A, and we'll sort of toggle between those two forms of coming forward and engaging with us. So welcome, and Eric.
Thank you, Shah. We wanted to start the day with a solemn acknowledgement of stolen land, stolen labor, and stolen lives. We are scattered far and wide these days, convening here through the Zoomscape, but most of us are dialing in from the western half of Washington state. Those of us who are not Indigenous are visitors here. And we want to begin by acknowledging that fact, by recognizing that the treaties that ceded these lands are still in dispute, and by stating that it is our responsibility to never forget this as we pay our respects to the elders of the tribes of the Salish Sea, who are the traditional caretakers of these lands. We have a lot of work to do in this respect. We also want to acknowledge stolen labor. Not everybody who is not from here came here voluntarily. Many people, including many people of color, and particularly Black people, had their labor stolen from them as part of the culture that we live in right now. We also need to remember that many women of all races had and still have their care work, their labor of social reproduction taken for granted. We wish to acknowledge these labors and also want to propose that we never forget the pain and suffering that so rarely is included in history books, even as it continues on in communities that continue to bear the brunt of these histories. And we want to acknowledge stolen lives, lives ended too soon by what Ruth Wilson Gilmore calls an unequal distribution of premature death. In particular, we want to pay homage to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others who have died prematurely as a consequence of ongoing personal, mob, and state violence. We started to hear it said about 5 years ago as part of the movement for Black lives, and we may need to remind ourselves for a little while yet. When Black lives matter, everybody lives better. When Black lives matter, everybody lives better. Those are our acknowledgements. I'll hand it over to Jordan, who will introduce Dr. Gilda Sheppard for our main event.
Hey everybody, my name is Jordan Silvera, and I'm part of the Foundational Studio projects here at Evergreen. Less than a year ago, I was spending my 20s behind bars. Today, I am free here with all of you. Yet I have friends that I left behind in prison that will spend a lot more time serving disproportionate sentences, and some that will even die behind those same bars. I tell you this because if you didn't have a chance to watch it, today we have the creator of Since I've Been Down, Dr. Gilda Sheppard. She's a documentary filmmaker, sociology professor, and someone who truly knows and cares about this situation of mass incarceration, and more importantly, the lack of justice and equality in our so-called justice system. She not only knows and cares, she actively works to see and show the deeper roots of this monumental problem and seeks to improve it through bringing raw knowledge and awareness to it through her film and her classes. Gilda is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. Her films have been screened throughout the US and Ghana, Africa, France, and Germany. Gilda seems to pick only subjects of great importance for her films, such as stories of refugees, poverty, ethnographical folklore, all of which I'm super excited to hear about. So before I pass off the mic, I've been invited to read a short poem that I wrote while I was still in prison. Memories flood back in like a dream you can't wake up from. Pretend to be someone, your identity you're wound up in. Sever every tie that binds the mind to this lack of abundance, this undying urge for never-ending consumption, consuming all just to feel free of the empty feeling in your stomach. Whispers in the fog of undoneness, fills your lungs and separates us from oneness. Never enough, it's enough to make you wonder if there's a purpose in embodying this living, breathing dungeon we grew up in, where there's enough for all, but only some get the luxury of needing nothing, while others eat scraps like rats in the sewers in an unending need for something just to keep their bodies from ceasing to function. What is sacred? Nothing. Or is that just a misconceived assumption? Because we assume there's no purpose in this place we've ended up in. Gilda, to you.
Wow. And this is why I am a member of this phenomenal learning community. The invitation from Shah Osha, the amazing acknowledgement and collegial partnership that I have with Eric. I love you, Eric. And the work that we do together. Jordan, I know I've seen you in passing at Monroe, and to hear you take your life and put it into those beautiful verses. It's both bitter and sweet, but to have you be right here with us today is why I do the work I do, because I believe in transformative justice. And I think that that's what Evergreen State College was founded on. And that's the reason why I am proud to be a Sankofa gooey duck. How's that? We're going to put those things together, not as a dialect, but together. You know, anybody knows me, I have the gift of gab, so I better hurry up and start talking. So I want to show you some clips. And I see there's over 200 people here. How exciting. I wish I was there because I really get my energy from that vibe. I get into that zone with you all, but I'm going to feel it. I'm going to feel it through this cyberspace. Believe it. And so let's do it. Let me tell you how I started all of this. I'm going to tell you how I started becoming a filmmaker. That is, you know, through the lens of sociology and cultural studies, and my grandmother getting the Holy Ghost in church and doing her tambourine, and how she taught me that I could also speak in tongue. Now, some of you don't maybe not know what that means, and some of you do, and I have done it, and it scared the living daylights out of me. But I give it to her and to my mother and to my grandfather and to my brother who passed away, who I love more than life. and to my sister and my nieces and my grandchildren and my goddaughter. I do this work because of all of you. When I was a little girl, I used to sit in the closet a lot, dark. I like the dark. That's why I like to wear black all the time too. Sitting in the closet, and I had a flashlight, and I would just move it around in the closet. And I had the kind of family that would allow me to be eccentric, right? Allow me to do things that, I remember my mother told me, she says, I hope you never drive because you daydream all the time. And we would laugh about that. And she named me Gilda, it was really pronounced Gilda, because my mother from Black Bottom in Detroit, right? Very working class area. She graduated from Hampton College, but because of racism and sexism, she couldn't get a job, right? And so she worked as a clerk in a hospital. But she loved opera, and she took me to the opera all the time. And there was this one character from Rigoletto by Verdi, and her name was Gilda, a very tragic figure who dressed in drag one time. And so she named me Gilda. And so so I come from this very, fluid family. We're everywhere, my grandfather's a Garveyite. So anyway, so I would sit in the closet with this flashlight and for maybe 20 minutes or so and come out kind of exhausted. My grandmother would say, baby, what you doing in there? And I said, Grandma, I saw these images. I saw this, and I had to explain this. And she said, well, what were they doing? Did they talk? Can they talk? And I would say, yeah, this is what they said. This is what they said. And she would laugh at me. And she says, always make sense of the images that you see. You are a storyteller. Keep doing that, right? And she would kiss me and braid my hair. And I would smell all the food that she would cook throughout the day. And because of my grandmother and my entire family believing in imagination, and but also the importance of political struggle. Like I said, my grandfather was a Garveyite. I fused all those things together and became, a sociologist and a filmmaker. But I'm going to tell you that I grew up at a time when there was a Black arts movement that was going on, and that informed me because they were going against Hollywood standards, right? So I would watch these films from the Black arts movement, and I was a little girl at the time. I would listen to Amira Baraka do his poetry in such rhythmic tones, just like what Jordan was talking about, and it was just, he would almost dance his words the way he said it, and I was just outdone. It was like in my body, I felt like I could do the holy dance with him. Then I heard about this idea of third cinema, and it comes out of Latin America, and they were also looking at first world, second world, and third world filmmaking. So it became Latin America, Africa, and African Americans and Latinx people from the United States, and also European immigrants who came over from Poland and other places who were going to defy the way you tell stories, and created this thing called third cinema, but really came out of Latin America that pushed the narrative. And then it was the LA rebellion at UCLA, people like Haile Gerima, and they were also pushing the narrative. They added jazz, like you heard the music that, thank you Tech Team for playing some excellent jazz music. I thought that was maybe Art Tatum, I'm not sure, maybe it wasn't, but I love that piano. And so the LA Rebellion would do those kinds of things, would put music from the Black community. They wanted us to be subjects, not objects. They changed the narrative. I mean, even when a policeman would stop them as they were going in with I remember Haile Gerima was talking about this filmmaker from Ethiopia who was a teacher at UCLA, would talk about him and his crew going to a particular set, and a policeman stopped them. And he said, turn on the camera. And it became the beginning of one of his films. So it was like this rupture that was allowed to happen. It was cinema verite that was the most beautiful that you could ever imagine. It was right there. And that's the reason why I fell in love with ethnography. Being right there in the setting to allow something to happen, but being immersed in it as well, right? Being immersed in it as well. So from being in the closet with the flashlight, my grandmother encouraging me, going to operas, this little girl from the ghetto, going to the opera and not understanding what they were saying, but being amazed at the drama that was happening. And understanding that my mother graduated from Hampton College and could not get a job. And then listening to my grandfather who told me stories of Marcus Garvey, growing up during the Black arts movement, finding out about third cinema that gave me a global outlook of people of color all over the world. The LA Rebellion right here in the United States, to see these storytellers break the frame of a narrative development. And then meeting Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist and folklorist, who said that she wanted to deal with the Negro furthest down. I began to mold what I wanted to do, the passion that I wanted to. But then I thought I needed some theory to inform my practice. I remember Bell Hooks says she was hurting inside till she found theory and she could name it. It's important to be able to name what you're feeling inside, right? It's important for me to tell the stories that my grandmother asked me to do with that flashlight, with those shapes. And so I was influenced also by Bell Hooks, who talked about the oppositional gaze, the right of particularly Black women being able to deconstruct the images that we saw, not just consume them as this social practice, but to deconstruct them as well. I got interested in not just ethnography, but critical ethnography. So we not do what is, but what can be, Dwight Conquergood talks about. That we don't just put a camera on something and just say, there it is. But we give voice to that. Oh, not even give voice, we emerge in that voice to that, right? And also realizing that the idea of positionality. Where do we stand when we tell these stories? And I found Michelle Fine talks about positionality. Are we a ventriloquist, or what are we? And so, and then thinking about W.E.B. Du Bois when he did the Philadelphia Negro, and he said that he got all these Black folks from Fisk University. I think it was Fisk, or was it Atlanta University? Anyway, he went into Philadelphia and he collected these stories. And he said, we need not to be car window sociologists, where we look out at a car and we position ourselves so far away and we take an image and then we say, here we are, and make it exotic. Continue a narrative of the ghetto and those slow fade and the gore kind of things. That we need to see who we are and put that on screen. Then I went to Cuba. I met these wonderful Cuban filmmakers, heard about them, saw some of their films. And then the filmmaker Ozu, Japanese filmmaker who shoots low, those kinds of things. I was able to see images and frames and composition and how, and there was this one film where these kids were running across a mountain. I said, I want to put that in a film, right? So I don't remember some of the names. I remember scenes, and Ozu would do that all the time. Ousmane Sembene from Senegal, who was a dock worker and a writer, and he put those things together, and he used the language, his language, to create film. He's the father of African filmmaking. And when I went to the Cannes Film Festival, I walked up on the scene, and the first thing I saw was a picture of Ousmane Sembene. There he was. Raoul Peck, who I think is fantastic, who did the great film about James Baldwin and so many others. Sesoko, who did Timbuktu, where he has this kind of witch woman come in and just disrupt the narrative. How he uses a kind of ethnographic ways of doing things when he images the World Bank, but he has the story. I'm into docudrama these days. And Andrei Tarkovsky, the way he changes and uses metaphors for things, So it was all of these filmmakers, these stories starting from my grandmother that informed who I am today, right? And the way I look at filmmaking is the way that James Baldwin looks at an artist. He says the role of an artist is exactly the role of a lover. If I love you, I will show you things that you are not conscious of seeing. And that started with me. Did a film in Ghana, West Africa, on Liberian women and children refugees. And at the end of that film, it's just like me running and gunning. I had a camera and I had people. I had a camera and I had people. And I came in there thinking I want to do something because I'm feminist, intersectional feminist. I want to do something on female child soldiers, because all I see is male child soldiers. And so I found my way. I'm an organizer. I've been organizing since I was 11. I picked up a camera and started, old quarter pack camera, and go to people's houses and say, what do you think about desegregation? And then get it slipped into the city council building so that people could hear the folks in their neighborhoods talk about desegregation. I think it was in me. You know what I'm saying? I think it was just in me. And then I had all these examples around nature and nurture. They danced together. And so at the last day of filming in this refugee camp, this woman said, Sis Gilda, the same AK-47 that you see on the streets of Liberia are on your streets, and you need to do something about that. I walked in and I wanted to do something on female child soldiers. They said, that's not what we want. This is what we want. We want that we need to learn how to read and write. We need to learn how to do our own businesses and those kinds of things. So I followed their lead. So when this woman told me the same AK-47 that you see in the Civil War in Liberia on your streets and in your children's hands, just like the child soldiers you wanted to do, you need to go do something about that. So I followed her lead. Our now Dean, Marcia Taylor Runga, was teaching sociology classes at Monroe Prison, and she was going off to get her PhD. And so she asked me, do I want to volunteer teach? And so I started teaching sociology classes, and I've been teaching in prisons for the last 15 years. It took me 12 years to do this film. And I remember when I was in Cuba, and I was finding out about all the filmmakers there. This one guy, I was working in construction, and it was this one piece of towel that was messed up. And he says, he wanted to take all the towel out. And he says, and I'm like, what? And he said, we go slow because we're in a hurry. It took me 12 years to do this film. I went slow because I'm in a hurry, right? But I went from Dr. Sheppard in the classroom to Auntie Gilda to Mama G. That's the intimacy of the relationship that I had with those young men and women and non-gendered people that I've met in the prison. So I could also meet their families, right? I've gone to many family reunions. I met people who have been in prison since they were 13 years old, for 22 years. But then I met a group called the Black Prisoners Caucus. And it rocked my world. I realized not only the triumph of the human spirit, but that in spite of the culture of punishment, that these men, and now it's at the women's prison too, the Black Prisoners Caucus, but at the beginning, these men who started this organization more than 40 years ago were saving lives. We're doing what we need to do out here. I want to let you know that my film is not a prison film. Prison is a character in it, but it's not a prison film. It's an overwhelming character in it. I remember when I was teaching sociology and I talked about this concept called sociological imagination, that's looking at social forces that inform who you are and all those other things, you know? And I heard the most amazing stories, origin stories about why they found themselves in prison. I was like, where are you getting this? Right? You know, Gilda. And I realized that the Black Prisoners Caucus has these study groups and summits and those kinds of things. And so I wanted to do all those theories and put them together and think about all the scenes from the filmmakers that I admire. And I wanted to, my dear friends, create a love story. My film is a love story to the children who grew up in the Hilltop area of Tacoma, Washington. So I want to show you a few clips. Enough of my gabbing now. I want to show you a few clips, and I'm going to try to chew gum and tap dance at the same time. So here we go. I want to show you the person. First, I'll show you my trailer. Then I'm going to show you the person who's the spine of my film, Comonte Carter, his first speech. I'm going to talk to you about why I have mask in my speech in my film, and that's because of the mask I saw child soldiers wear in the Civil War of Liberia, and I think that the young men and women who are in gangs are like child soldiers here in the United States. Okay. All right, so this is a trailer of my film.
Looking back now, I'm able to see everything that happened. I wasn't able to see it then, so I wasn't able to avoid the traps that were set for me. A lot of us weren't.
All my friends is either in prison now, forever, or dead.
A lot of our children are in the streets suffering mentally. And when they make mistakes, they're being punished without being offered any alternatives.
We socialize to believe that prison and death is a normality.
It's easy for us to sit here and say, well, you could have done something different. Could they?
The reason why we still have gangs and drugs and violence and dysfunctional communities, because the underlying issues haven't changed.
There are many of us who do not believe that people who are in prison can have the answers to our problems. We do not believe that the people sleeping under the bridge can have the answers to their reality.
I'm pretty sure they still doubting us all the way up to this point. But you can't argue with our results. That's the thing that you can't argue with. Cameras in every classroom. Not only put a camera up in here, you can come and sit in our classroom and you can learn too.
Okay, that's Comonte Carter who's talking and said, you can come in our classroom and you can learn too. He's a member of the Black Prisoners Caucus. The Black Prisoners Caucus, which is a tendency among particularly Black organizing in my life and in history, is that Black people getting together and putting their ear to the ground and seeing what is, as Eric first said in his acknowledgement, then that everyone can feel safe. So Comonte Carter went over to the white nationalist gang the other gangs that he used to fight with outside in Hilltop. He was a Blood and the Crips, the Latinx community, and those who had been gang affiliated, and developed this group called TEACH, Taking Education and Creating History, realizing the importance of education and learning, not any education. He talked about liberatory education. Eric, I thank you so much, and so many more of you all, I hope, who are here. Savina, Peter, Anthony, so many of you have gone to, and more and more and more, I know, please forgive me for not knowing your names, have gone to the prisons and brought Evergreen, the kind of liberatory education that Evergreen does, to prisons. Now, let's be clear, those guys would say, this ain't nothing. But they know, because of the way we are fired in the kiln of social justice as a learning community, as scholars and activists here, you know. So we wear our contradictions. We know when we make mistakes, and we know that education can be liberatory. And so he started this group called TEACH, and but couldn't get a lot of people to come out there. So they taught the classes, and I'm going to show you some of the classes, but I want to show you this other clip for the first time that Kamanti came to understanding, you know, who he is as a leader and those kinds of things. Let me find that one, Carter. All right, there we go. Let me make it big. And this is Kamanti's first speech when he, you know, after being with the Black Persons Caucus. This is one of the Black Persons Caucus summits. Sorry about
My name's Kamani Carter, and I'm currently serving a life sentence for a gang-related drive-by that happened 9 years ago. My victim was innocent. He was also a student who was attending college. His name was Corey Pittman. At this time, I would like to apologize to the Pittman family, because only now have I begun to understand that the enjoyment of life once taken away can never be replaced. And I'm sorry. My history is the life of a lot of kids out there in our community. And my reality as a young man doing life in prison will be their future if we don't start creating better ways of dealing with our children.
So that was one of his first speeches, and Kamani Carter is 34 now. He's been in prison for a little over 20 years. This is 9 years into prison, and this is a result of that camaraderie. So what you have right there is both restorative justice and transformative justice. Restorative justice, I realize what I did, and I'm remorseful about it, and I can even speak his name. The beginning of my film starts out with one of the victims of his crime. I positioned her in a car very similar to the car that she was driving, that she was in when Kamanti Carter in another car killed her friend from another car, right? It's a drive-by shooting. I want my film to be a space for healing, not just for exposition, not just for spectacle, not just like, ooh, we get to see people in prison. Not at all. And I talked to her a long time. Like I said, it took me about 12 years to complete this film, you know? And she said, okay. And I told her, can I put you in a car and shoot it, right? To give it more ambiance, you know? To give it like some of the filmmakers I mentioned to you before would do. You know, some people wouldn't know it, but some people would. Sometimes you translate things, and sometimes things cannot be translated. So I wanted her to sit there, and she told me the story of what happened that night on camera. And I have her talking, and a guy who was an OG, who's no longer an OG, graduated from Evergreen State College, Tacoma, and now he's jamming, he's doing good work, you know, and I had them talking right after the other. juxtaposition it so you can see views, not just two views, multiple views, as well as the images around, all the ambiance. Everything tells a story. Everything in that frame tells a story. That's what I wanted to hear. So let me show you some more. Otherwise, I'm going, oh, I want to show you some more stuff. Let me see. Ooh. Okay, I'm going to go to this is one of the lawyers that I found, because when you talk to people, you find out different attorneys, or because I have victims, attorneys, anti-racist organizers, mothers, fathers, people who were OGs, people who women. I didn't get a lot of the women in prison shots, because I had this one administrator at the prison who only wanted me to shoot just certain women, and it was the so she told me the women, but I said I wanted to bring my camera in the classroom, and so I went to the superintendent when I first went there, and I said, okay, let me go to the superintendent. I walked in the door, and the guy said, hi, Dr. Sheppard. He had graduated from Evergreen State College, Tacoma. So let me tell you where we are. We're everywhere. Check out the Evening Weekend Studies program. They have graduated some of the best, I dare say, superintendents. Superintendent said about Kamonte Carly, he said, bring him back to Monroe. He's done more for race relations than anybody else. Wrote a letter for his clemency. This is what we can do, Evergreen. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Calm down, Gilda. So this is about mass incarceration. And this is one of the attorneys that I found in all my organizing research. And if there's any students out there, you all know, research. You're like, it's not running and gunning with your camera, you know what I mean? Or just like Once Upon a Time has history. Why do you say it? Anyway, let's do it. So this is mass incarceration. Lawyer talking to why some of the people that I met said he was cool, and some people say he wasn't cool, but I just want you to listen.
We have a greater percentage of our population in prison right now than any society in the history of Western civilization. And we have this high and mighty attitude about ourselves. I want you to imagine that as much as 60 to 70 cents out of every tax dollar in my county goes toward criminal justice. It is a horrendous waste of resources. If you don't care about people, it's a horrendous waste of resources on the profit and loss sheet.
It's very, very easy to instigate fear. That's what happened with 3 strikes, because the face of the threat then became young Black and brown men.
Now, what I want you to know is that, you know that 3 strikes law, first time it was enacted was in Washington State, not California. Don't believe the hype. We have no parole. I was talking to a senator, I'm going to tell you their name, in Seattle. And he was like, oh, yes, we have parole. I said, we haven't had parole since 1984. But it's a well-kept secret. Even she didn't know. I'm sorry I'm on speaker view because I make all these faces. She didn't know, right? And so I was like, wow, come to a screening, because I would screen different iterations of my film. And so I'm not blaming her. My film represents ideas, not just people. Okay? It represents ideas. Right? When I have police officers in it, I'm not just talking about this police officer, I'm talking about policing. I asked this one question, what is justice? I asked it to everybody. And I let these 2 police officers who I had heard about over and over and over and over again, call them bad cops, right? I said, I want to hear bad cops. I want to hear their side of the story. It's not about sides, my dear friends. It is about narrative. It's about building the narrative. So you can see, like I said, how we punish says as much about us as those we punish. That's Austin Surratt said, a legal scholar. And so I wanted to talk about what it represents. I know some of you all are reading in Irik's classroom about representation as social practice. Yes, not just the person. Where I enter, I'm not just Gilda Sheppard. I'm every Black woman you've probably ever seen, right? Everything. Woman with short hair, wear glasses, all those kinds of things, kind of swaggy in my dress and things, those kinds of things. So I'm talking about representation. So there's no parole, and has not been parole since 1984. And hard time for armed crime is big in the state of Washington. So my film is not about prison. It's about the culture of punishment and the triumph of the human spirit. It's a love story to children and what we do to them. I want to show you this other clip. And this is about gang pressures. I want to humanize. Imagine this. I wanted to humanize gangs. On the front of Evergreen State College, Tacoma, we have Ndebele, Ndebele, art. Dr. Joy Hardiman, Dr. Maxine Mims, who founded Evergreen in Tacoma, who did her own ethnography to create it. Dr. Joy Hardiman, her mentee, had the wherewithal when we moved from one place in Hilltop, we always were in Hilltop, to another place. She wanted to have images on the wall, on the outside of our building that represented the community. So we have the Laotian community, we have the gang community, we have the HIV community, we have the disability community, we have the Christian community, we have indigenous community, we have the Swedish community, we have the Jewish community, we have the Christian community, we have the community of indigenous people. We have so many different, and we have people, we have the come in to paint on our walls to represent that, right? So it's extremely important, this whole idea of representation. All right. This is Shannon talking, who was Kamanti's best friend in the Blood organization. One of the people who recruited him.
My homeboy fight, I fight. If he shoot, I shoot. What he do, I do. It's my brother. I don't leave him behind. You die, I guess we both die.
It's one thing to be able to study a subject, but it's another thing to be the subject. There's just some things in life that can't be taught. You know what I'm saying? They have to be lived to be understood. Being 14 and 15 years old, riding around with a gun, just hoping for that opportunity to really prove that I am somebody. It's not like you're out there trying to get a job, trying to stay truthful to yourself, and that you're gonna finish high school and all those different types of stuff. It didn't work that way. You know what I'm saying? Because the pressure that you was feeling in order to have to be able to take care of yourself as a young man, you know what I'm saying, was now to where the school and the future, we're not even thinking about those things no more, man. I'm 15 years old. I'm not in school no more. We hustling. That is it. You know what I'm saying? We're getting it by any means. You know what I'm saying? We got guns now. We're willing to take anything from anybody else because we wanted it.
The reason why I have those kids in there is so to remind people that we're talking about children. And like I said, when I was working in shooting a film in a refugee camp in Ghana, West Africa, I met child soldiers, and I want to show you. Okay, these are some child soldiers. I mean, look at this kid with a butterfly on the back, There were kids that I saw who wore masks too. I mean, they're children. There's one who I saw with a teddy bear stuck in the back of his backpack with an AK-47 on his arm, in his hands. And I wanted to remind ourselves what we do to children. We expel them. We call them bad. Not all of us, that's the royal we. So I wanted to show, folks, I got a little excited there, didn't I? That our children are like these child soldiers. Let me show you one more. Okay, And this is what was happening. It was almost like, and when they talked to them, they said, well, we had some drugs in us sometimes, but after a while, we were told by these older folks, and in Liberia, it was, what's his name, Charles Johnson, that who was a horrible person, that this is for your own safety and good. And you know about the brain science, your brain hasn't formed till you're 25. So what do we do about that? Those kinds of things. And so they wore masks a lot. They were in masquerade, as if they were playing. And so because they couldn't face what they were doing sometimes. If you remember, as Kamonte Carter says, riding around with a gun just trying to prove that you are somebody. This is a Lega mask, and it is a mask and he's sitting in where the Bloods used to run when they saw the police. And it's a beautiful forest, and that's the reason why I had the other clip I showed you, the guy sitting in the forest, because I believe in doing it in the context where people have been, right? And so this is a Lega mask, and it's from the People's Republic of the Congo, and it's a mask that is a protection mask. I don't want you to think that masks just hold and hide things. There's a beautiful poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. We wear the mask that grins and smiles, that hides our eyes and shades our, it goes on and on. It's what we do sometimes, what W.B. Du Bois says, that Black people do, and souls of Black folks have a dual consciousness, who we know we are, and sometimes how the world looks at us. And so, but this mask particularly is a mask for protection. And let me just, it's on my website, but this is how it goes. It's looping. And I put this dancer, a crump dancer, there to have him look up and just to go into the prison. And this is the image of the Black Prisoners Caucus. Those are the brothers who started Teach. Look at those brothers. All different ages. All of the people in my film committed violent crime. So my conversation with Michelle Alexander once, God bless her, she wrote a good thing about my film. But I said, that what the guys, because she came to Monroe Prison, and what the Black Prisoners Caucus said, and I'm gonna tell you who brought her, a guy who graduated from Evergreen, who was a superintendent. He and a woman who works for Yes Magazine. This is what Evergreen can do. He brought, with the help of Carol, Michelle Alexander, when she first got her book out years ago, and had the what some people call guards, officers, come hear her. Yes. But let me tell you what the gentleman said, the men who are my students and my teachers who are just as involved told her, they said, yeah, we like your book, it's very good. So, but you talk about nonviolent crime. That's easy for people to talk about. What about violent crime? What about that? And not just look at the brain science, but also look at people who are, and that's hard to think about, right? Someone who committed a crime and they're full adults, right? But what do we do? Do we put them away and keep the problem going? Those kinds of things. And that's what transformative justice, it looks at all our institutions. I better hurry up and stop talking because I got 3 more I want to show. Let me see here. This is a class called Healthy Thinking, right? And this is a gentleman named Damar Nelson. Eric knows him very well. And he's in prison for over 40, he's sentenced to over 40 years. Now we have indeterminate sentencing, no parole. And so, which means that there's this grid, this formula. However, there are many, you have to go before a clemency board, right? And if you don't have an attorney, then it becomes very difficult for you to get clemency. Monte Carter went before the Clemency Board, and he was denied even a hearing. Of another woman that you will see meet in these clips, Tanya Wilson, who's brilliant, who's out now, went before the Clemency Board and was denied, even though she started a group in the women's prison called the Women's Village. Sorry for the black screen, just bear with me. Started a group called the Women's Village, and the women's prison was one of the most violent prisons in Washington State. But once she started that, which was a peer prisoner initiated program, violence went down by 50%. She was denied clemency. Let me show you. This is one class called Healthy Thinking. They deal with, I'll let you decide what they deal with.
We don't have spaces in which we can truly be ourselves. And for you not to truly be your real self, man, you rob yourself every day. We gotta have places where we can come talk about. You gotta have that in the world. Everybody wants to grow, man. You know, even the people that tell you that they don't. The reason why they're saying that is they're probably afraid. You know, especially in a place like this.
I thought I was untouchable. I thought I'll never wind up back in prison again. I'm tired of thinking like that. You know, I got 7 kids. I got 6 daughters and 1 boy. I want to get out and I want to show that, you know what, I can be that father that you all deserve.
My son got incarcerated here, and I learned what my biggest fear was. And it goes back into what Dee had on the board about memory. One of my son's great friends is Charles Pouncey, and he said, your son used to say he wished he could come to prison just so he could be with you. In that moment, I said, this is what you've left your child and this woman and your family to do. They say, you said if you ain't thinking, it's dead. You're never too old to find that peace with your children, with yourself.
And that's one of the classes called Healthy Thinking, but they also have philosophy classes and math classes. And just let me show you what one of them talking about taking education and creating history. Okay, let me set that up for you. I'm moving fast. We can do this, Gilda. We can do it.
Almost immediately upon entering Clallam Bay, I found out that a few guys had just started a program that they called TEACH, and it stood for Taking Education and Creating History.
Me and Kamani Carter, I've been knowing him since we was kids in the same streets. He was on the east side, I was on the hilltop. So we was really rivals back then, but when he came here, I seen him and he was involved with BPC and he wanted to start a TEACH program. He came up with the idea, we was like, okay, let's do it.
There were several of us who were at Clallam Bay who had a lot of time to do in prison, and we weren't being allowed to attend education classes.
The priority for our education department is those individuals with 7 years or less on their sentence.
So if you have more than 7 years, which a lot of people do, you don't get a chance to get an education.
We wanted to get professors to be able to come out here, but we was too far.
So the next thing was, do we either let this program go to waste or do we figure out a way to make it float? So the way that we came up with was, we'll just teach the classes.
Work backwards from here, and then we're just gonna move on. So we knew that we could teach math, we knew that we could teach writing, and so it was more about the skill sets that we already had and being able to just really nurture those and provide those in a classroom setting.
2 and 8,
All right, and so y equals
4. So a negative and a negative is positive.
All right. We reached out to a lot of prisoners, right? Guys who had degrees and all that type of stuff, but then we also quickly came to the realization, just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you can teach.
How that? Okay. Isn't that lovely? And so they also have math classes that you can see. They have a class. There's this one class about Immanuel Kant, and this guy said, it's too deep, but this is what I think it is, and it was brilliant what he said. If you saw the film, you can hear him saying that. And then he says, well, and so Kamanti, who's teaching the class, says, well, like you said, it was so deep, and he said, well, it is. I'm not know if I'm right. And he says, it's not if you're being right or wrong. It's your interpretation. He said literary scholars will come in here and tell you exactly what Immanuel Kant meant. Yeah. And so he breaks down, he becomes this public intellectual. What did Everett Said said? That he says that to be a public intellectual is to deal with human liberation. I just want to show you one more clip and then I'm finished. Okay, just one more. And it's the clip that ends the film, right? I got so much to tell you, but watch the film. Okay, wait. The last scene of the film.
This is not about a prison education program. And to be very clear, it is not about the Department of Corrections at all. They just geographically happen to be oppressed there. They could be oppressed anywhere else in the community. It's a trip because we got some class issues going on. There are many of us who do not believe that people who are in prison can have the answers to our problems. We do not believe that the people sleeping under the bridge can have the answers to their reality. Because we have people with PhDs and master's degrees who then have been certified to do that work. And they have been doing it over and over and over and over and over again. I'm in a system where we've had a 10-year plan that has now turned into a 20-year plan, and they just changed the name. And it's game. Those brothers know game.
So for all of the classes that we've offered this summer,
we can't wait just for people in prison. Aaron's children have the solutions to our problems. And what we will do in 10 years, if we don't attend to this, we'll be visiting I'm not going to put that on your babies, but it's really the truth. Don't think it's not true. Because they got the DOC, the BOP, the Federal Detention Center, the juvenile system, everybody's in the business. And they're waiting for the education system to fail our babies so that they go in there. And I don't even want to blame DOC because it took a whole lot of institutions to get them there. We failed them. In spite of that, they've got the answer. That's that spirit that slavery did not kill. That's that spirit that the genocide, that attempted genocide of indigenous people did not kill.
And then the credits roll. So, okay, I'm exhausted. Okay. So now we get to talk?
Yes. I just want to, somebody's already put something in the Q&A. And Kelly, if you want to say it, speak up, we'll unmute you. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it. Kelly Bush. All right.
Oh, Kelly, my colleague. We be doing it.
All right. Well,
okay.
I'll read it. Dr. Sheppard, you are a gift. I learn something new every time I watch your film, and every time I have the good fortune of being in your presence. We are so lucky to be in community with you.
And it's a two-headed arrow. I've learned a lot from Kelly. Practice is a criteria of truth. And she shows me it. Shows up.
So we have a couple of hands up. So Xavier, do you want to start? You're gonna have to, I think, unmute yourself.
It looks like attendees can't unmute, so maybe.
Oh, there, Xavier entered.
Hi.
Hi.
I wasn't ready for that. But yeah, I get to show you my face and get to talk to you face to face. That's nice. Yeah, I saw a version of this film a couple of years ago at Evergreen in the Longhouse, and seeing it again and with new stuff added to it was really incredible. And every time I hear you speak, I'm always so filled with like 1,000 emotions, and I could ask you like a million questions. But about this film specifically, I was really, I was wondering what, I have my own interpretations, but I was wondering what your intention behind putting the shots of the logging areas were.
More of a metaphor of how we clear cut. And for those who were loggers and the antagonism, you know, among working class people about that, but also a metaphor of how we clear cut things and how, you know, and sometimes what we clear cut is things that will give us chlorophyll and oxygen and a healthy ecology. How we take people and we call it cleaning up a neighborhood. You know, and even people who look like the people that they've clean up a neighborhood for a false sense of safety because of fear, for a false sense of prosperity, you know, instead of looking at things as outcomes of something, right? You know, and so it was like a metaphor a lot, and it is on the road to the prison. So it's a drone shot from there. Everything is has that connection. I would love to hear what you thought. Because, you know, you put something out there, you know, the filmmaker has the intention, but once it's out there, it's a mini splendor thing, right? So at some point, I'd like to hear what you thought. Honestly, was it something like that or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the clear cutting, the deprivation of resources.
Yes.
But also, I saw it almost as something hopeful.
Yes.
Happening in the prison.
Yes.
This clear cut, but this land that can grow new forest.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Hallelujah. I'm having a moment. Okay. Yes. Mwah. Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Artel is next. Artel Kelly. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, there.
You have to unmute Artel.
I got it.
There you go.
Oops.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Thank you, Gilda. I just wanted to say I'm really grateful to be part of this Evergreen community. I'm clean and sober today by the grace of God. And I just want to say really quick, I wrote some stuff down while you were talking, but I'm 62 years old. I graduated from high school in the SeaTac area in 1976. It was a time when SeaTac was a safe place. Me and my buddies, we heard a Hilltop back then. We thought we were running and gunning too. We were only gunning dope though. We weren't gunning guns, but we knew better than to go to Hilltop. We stayed the hell out of there. I'm happy, both happy and grateful that there's kids growing up in Tacoma today that are told not to go to SeaTac, Burien, Tukwila, Kent area. And because it has had some transformation in the Hilltop area. I'm grateful. I noticed how you and Eric paid homage to people before you. So I want to pay homage to some of the OGs that were running gun and dope in the Hilltop area that showed me the way out of my insanity. I ended up at the Tacoma Rescue Mission in 2013. And I went through a 1.5-year program at the New Life program there. And I had a lot of OGs that used to run and gun dope in Hilltop that were pastors and counselors that shared with me a lot of hope. So when I got to Tacoma, it was the city of destiny. You know, it wasn't the city of evil. You know, so I just wanted to say that. And you know, I've been clean and sober 7 years now. I started at Tacoma Community College. I got my AA. I transferred to Evergreen. I'm 4 months away from a BA. And then, thank you. And then you talked about the closet when you were a little girl with the flashlight. And it just made me think of some things. I wasn't in the closet looking for images of truth like you were, nor like the movie The War Room. I wasn't in there praying, but I spent a lot of years in the closet, ashamed of who I was, scared of life, scared of myself, in the closet doing dope, you know, smoking crack and doing all that kind of stuff. You know, I wasn't confused about my gender in the closet. I just didn't know who I was. So I had a lot of things in common with those people in prison, you know, and only, you know, and because of my privilege, I didn't end up in the joint, you know, I could have been there too. And one last thing, just like, you know, alcohol and drugs are symptoms of the disease. I could really relate to the symptoms of the structural racism and the mess that we're in are only symptoms of the problem. So thank you for being here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, gangs are an outcome, right? And as soon as gentrification starts coming in, police start coming in, policing in a very negative, not to serve and protect. And you could see that in the particularly because Hilltop was a boosting economy, particularly for Black people. And that's where they put them, on the east side or on Hilltop, where the Crips and the Bloods were formed. Why did they form? Because they took, when Tacoma filed for more resources, it was rejected. It was structural reasons for this, right? And so if you go to the history, and part of my film, the folks talk about that because they did research on what were some of the structural problems, right? There was, Tacoma has always had a city manager, and it was this one problem called the Mother's Day riot. And this police officer was going after this one Black person, and they called it police abuse. And they wanted more resources coming in, and they cut off all the funding for model cities and everything. So fundings for schools and daycare, childcare, and all of that, and disinvestment in businesses. So people lost their jobs. Folks were coming home from Vietnam War with post-traumatic stress, and all of that culminated in all of this in this big burst. But I just had to say that, you know, those are some of the structural reasons. Yeah.
I think I will jump in here and read one or two of the comments that have been posted. We've got a really nice give back from a student in the Gateways program who says, as a student in Gateways this year, this film has helped direct my approach as a student working with co-learners at Green Hill, which is the juvenile prison in Chehalis. Thank you for presenting the power of liberation education in such a beautiful way. It really lights up my spirit.
I've used some of my clips for clemency hearings too. I give it to the family, and it's just some kind of way ends up in the clemency hearing, you know, so that it'll help for people to see what these men and women have been doing inside.
And then we've got another comment, and I think this ends with a question from Mariah. Thank you for allowing us to bear witness to your work and to these stories.
Oh.
What would you say was the most surprising aspect of making this film, working with the people and their stories over the 12-year process? So what was most surprising in doing this work? Excellent question. Thank you, Mariah.
There's so many surprises, you know. Some of them was my own conservative thoughts about people. You know, I would say, this is your second time in prison? Not you, maybe him, but not you. So it was a liberation inside myself. And anytime we do art, anytime we create, we rupture ourselves in a beautiful way. So I was able to see my contradictions. But I also was, I remember after filming one day, this one guy, Marco Rodriguez, I think you know him, Eric, he came to me because the Latinx community and the Black community in prison don't hang as a rule of thumb. I didn't know that. I thought Black and brown, right? And so that doesn't happen as much. But that's what Teach helped to bring together. But Marco would always hang around. And then he says, no, I can't be on camera, you know, because his community would look at him and say, man, what you doing with them? Right, you know? And so then one day he says, I'm going to do it. And he brought all of his brothers with him and did that. The power, it's not a surprise. Maybe it's just an elation. It's just a triumph that you see. And I remember Marco gave me a note that says, we trust you, but we don't know what you're going to do with this. Do not focus in on our tattoos. Do not focus in on this. And please understand, this is not a prison film. Right? I was surprised when someone with a swastika on said to me, he's after taking Marco's class, after Monte Carlo went over to the white nationalist group, after taking Marco's class, I realized that we were fighting the same enemy. And that just because I believe in something doesn't mean I have to disrespect him. So he teaches a Viking class and Marco teaches a class on Central America, and they swapped students. So you know the power of education, but to experience it, liberatory, to experience it is just like, what? And they're doing it in one of the worst places possible. It's not because of prison. It's not because they're trying to live a monastic life that they don't have all these horrors around them. But if that tells you that they can do it in the worst place possible, what is wrong out here? It made me look at this. I thought, what is this? They call us free people. Eric, weren't you shocked when they said, you know, when free people come in here, I'm like, who? But relatively speaking, you know what I mean? You know, the illusion. Anyway.
There's that moment where DeMar says in your film, I need to check myself when I'm in the classroom. I need to check myself because I feel free.
Yeah.
And that's a theme that runs throughout. Mary Flowers articulates it beautifully. And I think that's one of the accomplishments of this film is to communicate that contradiction. And it is a contradiction, but it is freedom.
It is freedom.
Within the constraint.
It is. It is just amazing how it is. It just, you know. So now I'm speaking from the legislature. You know, I just spoke to them the other day because, you know, this is not just a film that you put to the side. It's a film that walks.
You know, it took 8 years. It should last a long time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Tara, do you want to speak? Here we go.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. I want to say, when I saw the film, I thought, oh my, this is a love letter. And I want to say thank you for this love story. I feel like anyone with an intact love muscle can't help but be deeply changed by it, like at a body level. And so thank you so much for this film. And the question I want to ask is about interdependence. I'm only 2 years into teaching in prisons, but about 3 weeks in, I started having a feeling, and this is maybe weird, but it was a body feeling first, and I couldn't articulate it. And then several weeks later, what came to me is, oh my goodness, the people living in prison have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
A better world. And I want to ask you about more about, if you would speak more about that and about interdependence between those of us living out here and people living in prison, interdependence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you know, some of the greatest philosophers says, open the door of the prison and you will see civilization and all that. Yeah, I do believe that. I do believe with Zora Neale Hurston when she says the Negro furthest down we need to pay attention to. And Negro metaphorically as well as Negro Black people, right? But metaphorically, the people furthest down. But I'm not romantic about that. You know, I don't think like everybody that's the lumpen proletariat or the da-da-da-da-da, you know, or is the organic intellectual. I'm not romantic about that, right? But I do believe that it's like Bell Hooks says, when you choose the margin as a place of radical possibilities, are you with me? Because if you're living on the margin, not just living, even if you're in the center, but you choose a margin kind of perspective and practice, that means you understand that the social forces, the outcomes could be this, right? Because you're not just spinning around in a center. You have this view of almost everything, panoramic view, a certain kind of consciousness, possibility, right? And I'm not talking because, you know, privilege can blind yourself. It can blind you. And, you know, and I deal with my privilege as being, you know, PhD. And I use it. First time I got my PhD, I put it on my checks, you know. You know, and we said it, but anyway, you know, the political economy there. But yes, I do believe, but I do believe I'm not romantic about it. But I do believe the possibility, because if you look at history and all of that, it is the culmination of what we do to people, some of the worst things that we could do to people. I mean, you think about Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. You know what I mean? You think about when all that, the possibility of being on the margin and able to see, right? And but it's not romantic. It's not like, well, let's put him in prison and this would have happened. No, but sometimes the person furthest down looks up and can see all the dirt, right? And understand that it's piled on them, and then not just rescue the people who are falling in the water, but getting the person who's throwing them in the water, not just the person, but the policy. The policy, the clarity of vision is what is amazing to me. Right? One day I went into my class and it was all these new guys in the class. It was like it was packed. I'm like, what in the world? And one chair in the middle. And said, well, we hear you're having a family summit at Evergreen State College, Tacoma. And the guys came here because they wanted to sit in the chair. We want you to film us saying how we're sorry. One after the other sat in a chair, cried and talked about how they're sorry. I'm sorry. And talked about why they're sorry. Spoke to their kids, and we didn't even edit that. We just let it roll. And some folks was like, oh my God, but not one of the family members stopped. We played it during lunch. The kids looked at it. So yes, I think that the possibility is great. There is something about that, you know, something about being a woman, that sometimes we can see certain things, right? It's not because of our oppression. I'm not saying that we need oppression in order to see. No. But there is a tendency, you know, sociology deals with tendencies, that if you get slapped, metaphorically, You can feel the wind from that slap and where that hand comes from. You know, as interdependence, we need to use our privilege in a responsible way. That's the reason why I clip things together and give it to the family for Christmas or whatever, the birthday, and it ends up in a judge's hands. This judge said about Willie Nobles, who's getting out. He says, "But did you see that film?" They don't see there's this alienation. You know, Marx talks about alienation and false consciousness. It's this alienation, and all you see is what they did. But like Kamanti says, we'll never be a different person, but we'll be a better version of who we are. The interdependence is, yes, we need each other. We are tragically and beautifully connected. I just had anyway, you know, I used to think if someone hurt my grandchild, I'd scratch his eyes out, his eyes out, their eyes out. But then now I think, I don't want this to happen anymore to anybody else because it hurts so terribly. What can I do to do transformative justice? Not just throw this person in the garbage bin. That doesn't stop. I don't want nobody to feel like I'm feeling. I want to change things. And this is what art can do. What did Bertolt Brecht say? He says, art is not just putting a mirror up to humanity, it's giving you a hammer upon which to shape it. That's how we are artists, and we're all artists. The way we talk is the performance. You know, what did Conquergood say? Dwight Conquergood says, there's performance in our dialogue, right? You know, there's theater of when I went in front of the legislature, I felt like this is the theater of the oppressed. I felt like, you know, I get nervous, but then I get into a zone that artists sometimes have the privilege of being able to get into. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Is that you, Tara Hardy? Ding? Is that the Tara I know? I think so. Anyway. Okay. I know I can go a little off sometime, but sorry.
So I think we have just time for one more. We've got a few minutes left. And you have so many questions that are written down up here. So hopefully we can save those and get them to you, because there's, as anticipated, a lot of interest and engagement here. This is from Prita. Who said, "Thank you, Dr. Sheppard, for creating such a beautiful and inspiring film. Our program is currently reading Barbara Ramsby's book, Ella Baker and the Black Freedom Movement. The TEACH program and the BPC embody Baker's worldview, especially in regards to centering the knowledge and leadership of the communities most directly impacted by oppression. The incarcerated people are also examples of the Gramscian concept, organic intellectual, that Ramsby talks about in the book. In what way did Ella Baker's approach to community organizing and social change influence you?" And we'll end with that question.
My Ella Baker was my grandmother. There are many Ella Bakers, right? So yes, intentionally, yes, indeed. I was influenced by Ella Baker, right? You know, but Ella Baker is not just someone in my memory or someone I read about. There are so many Ella Bakers in my life that are more proximal to me, right? And so Dr. Maxine Mims, who started Evergreen State College in Tacoma, she did it for liberation, to create that's the reason why she says that when people come in on in their first year, they to write their memoir, so they can look at their life. And as Kamanti says, you can never be a different person, but you can be a better version of who you are, right? So Dr. Maxine Mims was my Ella Baker. My grandmother was my Ella Baker. My grandfather was my Ella Baker. It was very intentional. I was lucky to grow up fired in the kiln of liberatory education, right? You know, and so I have, someone said, you know, it's two important things: the day you were born and the day you realized why you were born. And I think this is why I was born. So, yes. And, I read it, The Organic Intellectual. Gramsci came out of the text and walked. but it walked with me before going into the prison. It walked with me with my brother, who was brilliant and dropped out of school. Right? I'm second generation college. My mother went, but my brother is brilliant. He dropped out of school because of the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that's in schools, right? He's the organic. So I knew about this. But it's like Bell Hooks said, but then you read about it, somebody publishes it, and it's somebody great like Ella Baker and Antonio Gramsci, and even what Foucault says about knowledge and a panopticon gaze. I saw it in the prison all the time. Don't you see it, Eric? It's like, bam! I mean, it's even in the architecture. It's like, whoa! To take these things and just see them, it's like, whoa, or see them and then like, oh, is that what he was talking about? Okay, I get it now, right? And so, yeah, it was intentional. But I just want to say that the intimacy and the proximal relationship I had was in my socialization. Many of my, the film's interviews lasted first one person be 3 hours, right? My crew was like, my team was like, but then I got these beautiful things. And a lot of it was in the classroom, when we talk about sociological imagination. You hear people talk about, I was socialized, total institution, and those kinds of things. It's because, they were in the class, in our class, right? Those kinds of things. So yeah, it was definitely influential with me. And, but it was also the Ella Bakers in my life, right? And the Zora Neale Hurstons in my life, and the Angela Davises in my life. I've been reading Angela Davis. I mean, I was on a panel with her. I mean, I showed her my film and she said, come on, let's talk. And I'm like, whoa. So, and she likes the film. Mm-hmm. But I think she likes the film particularly because of the transformative justice that it brings out. Hurt people, and we need restorative justice. Let's be clear. But we got to transform this place that we are. We got to keep transforming Evergreen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just have a love story to Evergreen. Do we have a responsibility? Oh yeah, to our students, to our administration, to ourselves, and to our staff, and to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a perfect way to say we send you our love, and I wish we could all be in the room. But just us in this little room have to applaud for you. This is what we have, but it's definitely out there. There were over 200 people here today.
Oh, wow.
And the love is here. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing this work.
Thank you. We have just enough time starting now. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.